"You're not invited. You can just stay home and watch Liam." My own mother said those exact cruel words at our crowded Memorial Day dinner. She announced it proudly in front of 25 staring relatives, all while I was secretly paying the massive monthly mortgage on the very roof over their heads. She fully expected me to shrink away and cry. She expected me to weakly beg for a seat. Instead, I just smiled, and the thick manila folder I pulled out of my battered tote bag next made the entire room go dead silent for a completely different, terrifying reason. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're watching from. My name is Delilah Foster. I'm 32 years old, a single mom, and for the last 3.5 years, I was the person who kept my family afloat until they made it very clear I was never actually part of the family. Now let me take you back to a freezing night in January. The wind outside my window was howling, rattling the cheap glass of my tiny apartment. It was 4 months before that explosive Memorial Day dinner. That was the night my mother Loretta first asked me to book a wedding venue in Prague. Every month, on the 2nd, the routine was exactly the same. I sat alone at my chipped kitchen table. The laptop screen glowed against my tired face, casting long shadows in the dark room. Click, transfer $2,600 from my checking account to the mortgage servicer. That massive sum kept the lights on at the house on Walnut Grove, the beautiful colonial with the wraparound porch, the fresh flower beds, the American flag flapping proudly in the breeze. My parents' house, the home I grew up in. This heavy arrangement started 3.5 years ago. My father, George, had brutal back surgery, 2 herniated discs from 35 years of hard construction work. He went on short-term disability. I still remember the phone call. 10 at night, Loretta's voice was cracking, sounding so small and terrified. "Delilah, we're going to lose the house. Your father can't work. I don't know what to do." Just for a few months, she had begged. Just until he gets back on his feet. A few months turned into 42. 42 months of holding my breath. I never missed a single payment. I also silently handled their property taxes. I scheduled George's physical therapy. I renewed their car insurance whenever Loretta magically forgot. I was the family's secret backbone, and nobody ever sent a simple text saying thank you. Meanwhile, my older sister Penelope lived her best life in a fancy midtown apartment. She carried a Chanel bag that cost more than my rent. On Saturdays, she called home just to complain about her Pilates instructor. She gave nothing, no money, no help, no time. Yet when Loretta spoke about her daughters, Penelope's name always sparkled first. I drove a beat-up 2016 Corolla. Whenever I pulled into my parents' driveway, I parked right next to Penny's shiny leased Lincoln. "It doesn't matter," I would tell myself, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "You're doing the right thing." I kept every single bank receipt in a folder. Why? Maybe deep down I hoped someone would finally see my sacrifice. Nobody ever did. The life-changing call came on a Wednesday. Loretta's voice dripped with that special sugary sweetness she only used when she needed a huge favor. "Wonderful news, sweetheart. Penelope is engaged. Garrett proposed. They want a gorgeous July wedding in Prague." I smiled into the phone. "Congratulations." I truly meant it. Garrett came from old, heavy money. He was everything Loretta had dreamed of. Then came the trap. "Now, honey, Penny and I need someone smart to handle the venue. You're so amazing with numbers and budgets." I am the family calculator, I thought bitterly. So, I became the wedding planner for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. I just didn't know that dark twist yet. For 4 exhausting nights, I scoured European websites. I found the perfect dream. A private 18th century mansion in Malastrana with ivy walls and a wrought iron gate. The price? $22,000 for the weekend. They needed 40% upfront. I put down the massive deposit. I put my own name on the contract. I used my own credit card. Why? Because Penny didn't want the charge ruining her statement, and Loretta's limit was too low. The very next morning, Penelope emailed me a demanding 4-page list of requirements. Specific flowers, custom linens, dietary restrictions, not one word of gratitude. But at the very bottom of the email was a tiny attachment. Preliminary guest list. I clicked it open, the bright white screen burning my tired eyes. I scanned the rows of names, looking for my own. I read it once. Nothing. I read it twice, my heart beginning to pound a strange, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Then a third time, tracing my finger down the glowing glass. My name wasn't there. For a split second, my innocent brain tried to protect me. She just forgot, I whispered to the empty room, but a cold, creeping shadow in my gut told me the devastating truth. I wasn't just accidentally left off a spreadsheet. I was being erased from my own family. I should have seen the ugly pattern long before Prague ever entered the conversation. The painful breadcrumbs were always there, scattered across the years, waiting for me to finally open my eyes. Take my college graduation. The day I walked across the grand stage with a 3.9 GPA, I searched the cheering crowd for my family. Empty seats. They finally showed up 45 minutes late. Did they even care? George offered a weak, mumbled apology about bad traffic. Penny had an acting audition across town. And Loretta? Not a single word of regret. She spent my entire graduation reception staring at her phone, loudly coaching Penelope on her audition lines. Then came the absolute most important day of my entire life. My sweet boy Liam was born. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, with a loud, beautiful, healthy cry. I lay in that sterile hospital bed, exhausted, terrified, and aching for my mom. She finally walked through the door, 72 hours later. "I'm sorry, honey," she breezed in, barely glancing at my tired face. "I was helping Penny move into her new apartment. You know how she gets with cardboard boxes." She held my newborn son for exactly 5 minutes, snapped one quick picture for show, and rushed out to meet Penny for a fancy dinner. Boxes. She chose moving boxes over her first grandson. Just last Christmas, the stove heat blasted my face as I cooked an entire holiday feast. Ham, scalloped potatoes, green bean casserole, 3 pies. 15 loud, hungry guests filled my parents' house. When everyone praised the delicious food, Loretta smiled her perfect, practiced smile at the table. "Penny picked the menu," she announced proudly. Penelope was miles away, FaceTiming from a snowy ski lodge in Vale. She hadn't chosen a single recipe. That night, I sat alone in my freezing car, watching my breath fog the windshield. I texted Catherine, my fiercely loyal best friend since college. "Am I crazy, or is this not normal?" The typing bubbles danced for a second, then her reply. "It's not normal, Del. It's never been normal." I stared at that glowing screen, my chest incredibly tight. I swallowed the heavy lump in my throat, went inside and fed my son. Because that's what I did. I swallowed my feelings. I survived. I kept showing up, foolishly hoping that if I just gave enough, one day Loretta would look at me the way she looked at Penny. Fast forward to a rainy Thursday night in January. Liam and I sat at our tiny dining table, the wobbly one I built myself from a Target box using a YouTube video. Our apartment was painfully small but spotless. 1 bedroom for him, a cheap pull-out couch for me. I worked brutal double shifts during tax season and took freelance gigs just to keep our lights on. Every single month while $2,600 magically vanished to Walnut Grove, my growing boy ate generic spaghetti because the organic brand cost $4 extra. He looked up at me with those huge processing brown eyes. "Mommy, are we going to Prague too?" My heart shattered into a million sharp pieces. He had heard Loretta gushing about it on a video call earlier that week. All Penelope this, all Garrett that. "We'll see, baby," I whispered. I hated that phrase. It was the coward's way adults said no when the truth was simply too heavy to carry. I didn't even know if I was welcome. Then Tuesday hit like a runaway freight train. Just 24 hours after I sent the massive mortgage payment, Liam tripped on a jagged concrete edge at the playground. The terrible crack of his skull, the blinding panic, blood poured down his little face, soaking my shirt. The ambulance sirens screamed in my ears. 4 stitches later, the hospital handed me an $800 emergency room bill. I had nothing. My checking account was overdrawn to 0. Shaking violently, I called Loretta from the glaringly bright waiting room. "Mom, Liam is in the ER. He's safe, but I need $800 for the bill right now. Please can you wire it back from yesterday's mortgage transfer?" Silence on the line, then a heavy, annoyed sigh. "Oh, Delilah, the timing is just awful. Penelope had her final dress fitting this morning, and the alterations were astronomical. I put it all on the card. You'll have to ask a friend." Click. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. My son's head was split open, and she chose a hemline over his health. That night, after Liam finally slept, the accountant in me woke up. I opened my laptop in the dark. I pulled up 42 months of bank records, $2,600 here. Property taxes there, plumber bills, the massive venue deposit, The final glaring number flashed on my calculator screen. $140,700. I stared at the screen, unable to blink. 3.5 years of my blood, sweat, and drained savings. My son's future college fund, completely wiped out. Everything went into a desktop folder named Family Finances. 3 days later, my annoying cousin Chloe knocked on my door, Loretta's favorite little spy. She stood in my tiny kitchen, judging my cheap cabinets, while packing up my crystal bowl for Penny's bridal shower, another event I wasn't invited to. "It's honestly so sad you refused to go to Prague, Delilah," she chirped casually. "Penelope was crying about your selfishness yesterday. I mean, making Mom beg you, and you still said no?" I froze. The air completely left my lungs. "Refused?" My voice sounded like a ghost. "Yeah," Chloe said, grabbing her purse. "Everyone knows you hate planes and crowds. Anyway, thanks for the bowl." The door clicked shut, leaving me standing alone in the suffocating silence. My family hadn't just forgotten to invite me. They had constructed a massive, elaborate lie to keep me away, and I was about to find out exactly why. 4 weeks later, the exact reason for my missing name finally clawed its way into the light. It started on a quiet Sunday morning. Sunlight poured through my cheap apartment blinds, highlighting the swirling dust in the air. I dialed Penelope's number, forcing my voice to sound light and casual, like I was just checking a minor detail. "Hey, Penny," I began, my chest suddenly feeling tight. I was double-checking the venue contract and noticed the guest list attachment. My name wasn't on it. "Did you want me to add myself, or are you handling that separately?" Silence. It wasn't the normal sound of someone thinking. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of someone caught red-handed. "Oh," she exhaled a long, shaky breath. "Mom said she'd talk to you about that." The floor beneath my feet violently tilted. I felt the sharp drop in my stomach before my brain could even process the warning bells. Mom was supposed to talk to me. I hung up and immediately called Loretta. She answered on the second ring, already mid-sentence, chattering endlessly about elegant napkin folds. "Mom," I interrupted, my hands trembling slightly. "Penelope said you'd talk to me about the guest list." A sickening pause hung on the line. Then her tone shifted entirely. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't sorry. She sounded completely matter-of-fact, the exact way you would casually explain a scheduling conflict to a stranger. "It's a very small ceremony, Delilah," she said smoothly. "Garrett's family is extremely particular. They have certain high expectations about how things look. A single mother with a 4-year-old, well, it's simply not the image we want to present." She let those cruel words settle deep into my bones, then added the final blow. "Besides, someone needs to watch Liam." The next day I stood frozen in my small office at Harrison and Partners. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed loudly overhead like an angry hornet. I stared at my own reflection in the cold window glass. I looked exactly like the terrible picture she had painted. Deeply tired, painfully ordinary, and completely forgettable. The kind of faded background character you would easily leave off a list and assume nobody would ever miss. "She is right," a tiny broken voice whispered in my head. I hadn't argued on the phone. I hadn't begged her to reconsider. I had simply said nothing and ended the call. This wasn't a clumsy mistake. Penny's guilty hesitation proved it. Loretta's perfectly rehearsed delivery confirmed it. They had secretly discussed this. They had decided together that I didn't belong in their beautiful picture. The only detail they hadn't figured out was how to break the news to the family bank teller. Me. My phone screen went dark on my desk. I placed it face down and stared blankly at the beige wall for a very long time, feeling completely hollow. The gaslighting became too suffocating to bear. I desperately needed fresh air. That Saturday, I took Liam to the crowded mall to buy him cheap clearance sneakers. We were just walking out of Target when disaster struck. We practically collided right into Penelope. Standing right next to my sister was Joanne Winslow, Garrett's incredibly wealthy mother. Penelope's face instantly drained of all color, going sheet white. Joanne, wearing a soft cashmere sweater that easily cost more than my entire car, smiled an awkward, polite smile. "Delilah, hello?" Penelope was just telling me all about Liam's little playground accident. "So glad he's doing okay. It really is a terrible shame you dislike crowds and formal events so much. We truly would have loved to see you in Prague." My breath hitched. Penelope shot me a look of pure, unadulterated terror. Her wide eyes were silently screaming a begging warning. "Don't ruin this for me." My pulse pounded violently in my ears, drowning out the mall noise. I looked at Joanne's kind face. Then I looked at my terrified, lying sister. Yes, I finally said quietly, the bitter word tasting like dry ash in my mouth. A real shame. I grabbed Liam's little hand and quickly walked away. My hands were shaking so violently that I dropped my car keys twice on the hot parking lot asphalt. The lie was massive. It was a dark, living monster they were happily feeding to Garrett's powerful family, all while securely standing on my tired shoulders. I uncovered the full depth of their betrayal from Aunt Rita. Loretta's younger sister was the kind of chatty woman who often shared way too much without realizing it. She called me later that week to ask about a potato recipe for Memorial Day. Mid-sentence, she carelessly dropped a bomb. "Oh, and I told your mother in the Prague chat that I'd bring an extra carry-on just for shoes. You know how those horrible cobblestone streets ruin good heels?" I went completely still. The kitchen felt instantly freezing. "The Prague chat, the group text for the wedding trip," Rita said cheerfully. "Your mom set it up. Wait, you're not in it." She caught her mistake a crucial beat too late. The panicked pivot in her voice told me everything I needed to know. After we hung up, I sat with that devastating information the exact same way you press gently on a fresh, dark bruise just to confirm it's real. My own mother had created a lively family group chat to plan the European trip. She had excitedly added all the aunts, uncles, and cousins. She had purposely left me out. And she had done it while I was still literally paying off the deposit for the magical castle they were all happily gossiping about. Guilt ate at Rita. She texted me a screenshot later that evening. The lively group was titled Prague July, decorated with a cute tower emoji, an airplane, and a clinking champagne glass. 52 unread messages. Relatives excitedly discussing seating preferences, sharing luxury hotel recommendations, and reminding each other about passports. And right there, tucked neatly between the joyful logistics, was a message from Loretta. Delilah said she prefers to stay home with Liam. She's not really a travel person. My stomach violently turned. She had confidently rewritten the narrative before I even knew there was a story to tell. Inside that chat, I wasn't the rejected sister. I had happily opted out. I was the boring homebody daughter who hated airplanes, the one who would rather stay behind with her messy kid. I wasn't the exhausted woman who researched the venue, signed the contract, put her own credit card on the line, and paid the monthly mortgage on the roof over their heads. My mother didn't just leave me in the dark. She made absolutely sure no one would ever question the shadows. 4 agonizing weeks before the upcoming Memorial Day, Loretta called me again. She used that exact same sugared, sickening voice. She carried the exact same arrogant assumption that I would blindly say yes. "Memorial Day is at our house this year," she chirped happily. "You'll handle the food, right? You know how Penny and I are. We simply cannot cook for 35 people. I held the glowing phone far away from my face. I stared at the screen as if it were a dangerous, poisonous spider that had just bitten me. She was actually asking me to cook a massive holiday feast for the exact same relatives who had collectively decided I wasn't worth a cheap seat on a plane. She wanted me to show up early, tie my little apron on, smile sweetly, and be endlessly grateful for the rare chance to serve them. And then, she expected me to wave goodbye in July while they all flew away. "You have got to be kidding me," my inner voice screamed. I brought the phone back to my ear. "Sure, Mom," I said smoothly. "I'll be there." I said it calmly. Surprisingly, I even smiled into the empty room when I said it, because this time I wasn't nervously agreeing out of blind obligation or desperate love. I was agreeing because a brand new, terrifyingly sharp idea had sparked in my mind. The obedient, quiet Delilah was officially dead, and I was finally ready to introduce them to the new me. That afternoon, the sky outside turned a bruised, stormy purple. I drove in absolute silence to a blindingly bright office supply store. I bought one simple, cheap manila folder. Back inside my cramped apartment, the printer whirred and clacked for an hour. I printed everything, every single bank statement from the last 42 months, every auto transfer confirmation, the luxurious venue contract with my name proudly printed at the very top and my tired credit card number at the bottom, the polite email chain between me and the Prague estate coordinator. I stacked the warm papers neatly, clipped them tightly together, and slid them into the folder. I ran my trembling thumb along the sharp paper edge. It was incredibly thin, barely half an inch thick, but it held $140,700 worth of hard, undeniable truth, a massive secret that nobody sitting at that upcoming Memorial Day table knew a thing about. This is my entire youth, I thought, bound inside a 50-cent folder. At the grocery store the very next day, my phone buzzed with a new credit alert. I checked the screen and almost laughed out loud. A brand new charge for Loretta's fancy crate and barrel tablecloth. $75. It hit the exact same joint credit card I was desperately working double shifts to pay off. She was literally decorating her perfect holiday table with my stolen sweat. Fine, I promised myself right there in the checkout line. I am going to set the permanent record straight on that exact same tablecloth. Catherine didn't let me ease into the terrible reality. She never did. We met at a loud, bustling cafe near her real estate office. Exposed brick walls, overpriced iced lattes, surrounded by young professionals happily discussing interest rates. She took one sharp look at my pale face and slammed her coffee cup down. Tell me. So I spilled everything. The horrific phone call with Loretta, the secret family group chat, the hidden guest list, the magical castle I had personally paid for, the heavy mortgage I had been silently carrying for years, all of it laid out logically, the exact way I would present a failing client's tax ledger. Orderly, factual, and devastatingly clear. Catherine didn't interrupt once. When I finally finished talking, she didn't pity me. She didn't reach across the table for a hug. She didn't whisper, "I'm so sorry." Instead, she leaned in close and said the one brutal thing nobody else had ever dared to say to me. "Dell, you have handed them over $130,000 in 3.5 years. You sleep on a lumpy pull-out couch. Your beautiful kid wears faded second-hand clothes. Wake up." Her words hit my face like freezing water. "What would happen?" Catherine asked slowly, her eyes locking onto mine. "If you just stopped, not to punish them, just stopped." I had never allowed myself to think about it in those selfish terms, but sitting there, with the massive numbers still loudly echoing in my skull, I let the dangerous thought take shape. If I stopped paying the bank, my parents couldn't cover the bill. George's disability checks barely handled their electricity. Loretta hadn't worked a real job in decades. They would completely fall behind within 90 days. If I canceled the venue, Penelope would instantly lose her dream location just 4 months before her wedding. Rebooking anywhere in Europe during peak summer season? The options would be miserable and incredibly expensive. I wasn't ready to pull the trigger. Not quite yet. But a heavy iron door had violently cracked open inside my chest. Catherine kept her hand firmly on the edge, holding it wide. "You're not abandoning them, Delilah," she whispered fiercely. "They abandoned you first. You're just catching up." I tried one more time, because that's what the old Delilah did. I tried until the word trying lost all meaning. I drove to the Walnut Grove house on a quiet Friday evening. I found George out in the dusty garage. It was the only room in that massive house that actually felt like his. Fresh sawdust coated the concrete floor. A scratchy portable radio played classic rock. The sharp, familiar smell of linseed oil filled the air. He was hunched over, carefully sanding a wide, beautiful wooden picture frame. "That's nice, Dad," I said softly. "What's it for?" He didn't even look up from his work. "Your mother wants it for Penelope's engagement portrait. The fancy one from the Austin trip." I let that painful sentence hang in the dusty air. He is choosing a piece of wood over his own flesh and blood, I realized. I pulled over a wobbly stool and sat down. "Dad, did you know Mom told everyone I chose not to go to Prague?" His rough hand immediately stopped moving. The sandpaper went completely silent, but he still refused to look at me. "She said I'm not the elegant image they want," I pushed on, my voice cracking. "She told Garrett's rich family I'm not comfortable in formal settings. And she said all of it while I am literally paying the mortgage to keep this roof over your head. Did you know that?" George finally set the sandpaper down. He nervously rubbed his thumb against his calloused palm, the exact thing he always did when he desperately wanted to escape a conversation. "Your mother, she has her reasons, Delilah. I heard you booked the venue. 22,000. Put it on your credit card. Please, don't start a war over this. Just let it go." He turned his back to me. He went right back to the workbench. Back to the wooden frame, back to Penelope. I slowly looked around the dim garage. I saw his favorite fishing rod. I saw his old power tools, and then I saw the wooden shelf. 3 framed photos of Penny stood there, smiling brightly at different ages. Middle school portrait, high school prom, college graduation. I counted them twice just to be absolutely sure. There wasn't a single photograph of me, not one. I am a ghost in my own home. That was the final time I ever asked anyone in my family for permission to exist. Later that same night, my phone aggressively buzzed in the dark. "Loretta. Delilah, the Prague florist needs their final deposit tonight. I just forwarded the invoice to my email. You still have my password, right? Be a good girl. Log in, pay it with your card, and I'll pay you back later. I'm just too exhausted." Click. She didn't even wait for a response. The pure audacity was breathtaking. I flipped open my laptop, my fingers ice cold. I quickly logged into her messy inbox. I easily found the expensive florist bill. But right beneath it, my eyes caught a bold subject line I hadn't noticed before. July arrangements, guest considerations. The sender was Joanne Winslow, Garrett's mother. Joanne had written a very polite, formal email asking if there were any special dietary restrictions or seating arrangements she needed to consider. Just standard, wealthy mother of the groom stuff. But it was Loretta's reply that stopped my heart. It was dated December 12th, exactly 4 weeks before she had ever called me crying, begging me to book the venue. Her message read, "Delilah won't be attending. She's not comfortable in formal settings. She's always been more of a boring homebody. She's a wonderful girl, but it's really best for everyone if she just sits this one out. I hope you understand." Joanne's quick response, "Of course, Loretta. Whatever you think is best." December 12th. I stared at the glowing date until the screen violently blurred. She sold me out before she even needed my wallet. She had successfully convinced Garrett's family I wasn't coming long before she asked me to put down $22,000. Before the secret group chat, before the fake guest list, before the fake phone call where she acted like excluding me was a sudden, terribly difficult decision. It wasn't reluctant, it was entirely premeditated. I sat alone at my kitchen table, the blue laptop light washing over my pale face. My chest tightened so hard I couldn't pull in oxygen. A sudden, violent wave of physical sickness twisted my stomach. I stumbled into the tiny bathroom and threw up until my throat burned. This wasn't just another crack in my heart. This was a clean, brutal break, the kind of shattering that never ever heals back to what it was. I wiped my mouth, marched back to the computer, and screenshot the entire sick email chain. I printed it. I added it to the manila folder. The paper stack was getting thicker, and I was getting much, much quieter. Those two things were deeply connected. Okay, so let's pause for a second. Let me ask you something extremely real. Right now, I am sitting on $130,000 in receipts. I have an undeniable email trail proving my own mother maliciously lied about me to strangers, and I hold a venue contract with my legal name printed on it. What would you do? Option A, confront mom screaming immediately? Option B, cancel everything silently in the dark and disappear like a ghost? Or option C, wait for the absolute perfect, most devastating public moment? Drop your honest answer in the comments below, because I chose one of those three exact paths. And the chaotic explosion that happened next, I still cannot believe I actually had the nerve to pull it off. Memorial Day morning dawned hot and sticky. The humid air felt incredibly thick, heavy with the quiet terror of what I was about to do. I dressed Liam in his crisp khaki pants and a tiny white button-down shirt that I had carefully ironed the night before. He looked like a miniature handsome gentleman, and he absolutely knew it. He kept proudly smoothing his little collar in the hallway mirror. For myself, I bypassed the faded jeans and soft cardigans, my standard boring uniform for serving casseroles and scrubbing their messy dishes. Instead, I slid my arms into a sharp, dark charcoal blazer. It felt like armor. It visually screamed that I wasn't showing up to quietly serve them today. This year, I brought exactly one dish, a simple, cheap green salad. Loretta had confidently demanded I cook a massive feast for 35 people. I had agreed weeks ago, but somewhere between that painful phone call and this humid morning, the era of Delilah handling everything permanently died, starting with the menu. My heavy manila folder sat safely inside my battered Michael Kors tote bag. I had bought that purse at a cheap outlet 7 years ago. The leather was terribly worn at the corners, but it was the only remotely nice thing I owned. I checked the explosive contents 3 times before we left. Yellow highlighted bank statements, the signed venue contract, the printed email screenshots, everything clipped, organized, and absolutely deadly. Liam tightly held my sweating hand in the crowded parking lot as we slowly walked toward the massive house. The manicured lawn looked completely immaculate. George must have spent his Sunday mowing it. The American flag hung perfectly still. Shiny cars lined the long driveway and aggressively spilled out along the curb. Aunt Rita's boring sedan, Uncle Paul's dusty truck, and finally, parked closest to the front door like a royal throne, was Penelope's gleaming white Lincoln. I pay for the roof covering that car, I thought fiercely. Inside the beautiful colonial, I could already hear booming laughter and the polite clink of expensive glasses. Over it all rose Loretta's commanding voice. the flawless conductor of her fake, perfect symphony. "Are we going to have fun today, Mommy?" Liam asked sweetly, playfully tugging my hand. I looked down at his bright face. He was so open, so trusting, and still young enough to foolishly believe that family simply meant people who loved you. I squeezed his warm little fingers. I didn't answer him, because fun wasn't the right word for the nuclear bomb I was about to drop. 25 loud relatives sat crammed around the incredibly long dining table. It was set with Loretta's precious good china, the delicate cream-colored set with shiny gold rims she had inherited from her mother, and only dragged out for major holidays. Tall, elegant orchid centerpieces blocked my view. Sparkling cider fizzed in crystal flutes. Crisp cloth napkins sat inside heavy brass rings. Every single detail was obsessively arranged to project exactly what Loretta wanted the outside world to see. A wealthy, happy family that had it all together. Naturally, I sat at the very far end of the table, shoved right next to the swinging kitchen door. The servant's seat. It was the only spot I ever got. Liam sat happily swinging his short legs, already eyeing the warm dinner rolls. Way down at the other end, Penny sat proudly at Loretta's right hand. Garrett sat beside her, looking highly polished and slightly bored. George sat quietly at the head of the table, as silent and useless as a bookmark. Suddenly, Loretta stood up. She gracefully tapped her crystal glass with a silver butter knife, the universal, annoying signal that a grand speech was coming. "Everyone, please, I have the most wonderful news." Her bright smile was wide, heavily practiced, and completely radiant. "We are officially flying the entire family to Prague this July for Penelope's gorgeous wedding." The entire table instantly erupted. Wild cheers, loud clapping. Aunt Rita happily clasped her hands to her chest. Uncle Paul raised his bubbling glass high. Cousins turned to each other with wide, excited eyes. Penny beamed like a proud celebrity who had been desperately waiting for this exact applause her entire life. Garrett offered a modest, polite nod to the crowd. I sat perfectly still. I waited patiently until the joyful noise finally settled back down into excited whispers. Then, I spoke. My voice was chillingly calm and perfectly measured. "What exact date is the ceremony?" Loretta slowly turned to me. Her fake smile didn't drop. Instead, it sharpened. It gleamed exactly the way a hidden blade shines when it suddenly catches the light. "Oh, sweetie," she cooed, tilting her head with fake pity. She spoke to me the exact way you would address a slow child asking a stupid question. "You're not invited. You can just stay home and watch Liam." The loud table went completely, horrifyingly quiet. Not gradually. All at once. It was like someone had violently yanked the power plug on a massive stereo. Silver forks stopped midway to mouths. Shocked eyes dropped to their expensive plates. Rita's jaw literally dropped open, then quickly snapped closed. George stared intensely at the white tablecloth, refusing to look up. Loretta simply turned back to the frozen crowd, acting as if she had just casually commented on the mild weather. "Anyway, we really should talk about luxury hotel arrangements. I'm thinking the Stare Mesto district." Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Everyone at that long table expected me to do one of two pathetic things: cry, or quietly leave. Those were the only weak moves I had ever played. Cry, profusely apologize, shrink away, or walk out the back door so nobody had to deal with the ugly discomfort of my pain. "Not today," my brain hissed. "Never again." I didn't cry. I didn't run. I smiled. And I absolutely meant it, sitting right there in the suffocating silence Loretta had accidentally created. An incredible realization washed over my tense shoulders. This is it. The very last holiday dinner I would ever cook for people who didn't even count me as human. The very last massive check I would ever write for a huge house that had absolutely no room for my photograph. The very last time I would ever beg for a cheap seat I had already paid for. I slowly reached into my worn leather bag. I pulled out the thick manila folder. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs like a trapped bird. 25 pairs of eyes stared blankly at me. The gentle clink of silver had completely vanished. I slammed the heavy folder down onto the beautiful table, right next to the steaming dish of brisket. Thud. "Since we are all making grand announcements today," I said loudly, my voice echoing in the silent room, "I actually have one too." I flipped the folder open. I grabbed the first thick stack of papers. 42 months of bank statements, glowing with bright yellow highlighter. Every single massive mortgage payment I had made to the bank for this exact house. For 3.5 years, I have secretly paid the full mortgage on this beautiful house. Exactly $109,200. I slammed the second stark document down on the table. The fancy venue contract, my clear name printed boldly at the top, my personal credit card number listed at the bottom. I personally booked and paid for Penelope's magical wedding venue, $22,000. And then, the final fatal blow. The printed emails, Loretta's own cruel words, printed in black and white for the whole world to see. And this right here is my mother telling Garrett's wealthy family that I prefer a quiet, boring life and won't mind being entirely left out of the wedding. Dated December 12th, exactly 4 weeks before she called me crying, begging me to put down the venue deposit. Nobody blinked. Loretta's face instantly drained of all human color. It was a sickly, terrifying pale that started tight at her jaw and rapidly climbed to her hairline. I looked directly across the frozen table. Chloe, the annoying flying monkey who had come to steal my crystal bowl, looked like she was going to violently throw up. I snapped the folder closed. I am not angry, I stated firmly. I am just completely done. The mortgage payments stopped today, and that gorgeous Prague venue? It's legally in my name. I will be permanently canceling the reservation on Tuesday. Loretta recovered first. Her vicious instinct for self-preservation was much faster than her non-existent conscience. You are being ridiculous and dramatic, Delilah. This is Memorial Day dinner? This is a happy family gathering. Penelope's panicked voice cut in from across the table, sharp, shrill, and rapidly climbing into pure hysteria. You can't cancel my venue? Are you insane? That is my dream wedding? I kept my voice terrifyingly level. The legal contract is in my name, Penny. The maxed-out credit card is mine. Legally, it is exactly my reservation to burn. George finally shifted uncomfortably in his large chair. Delilah, please. This really isn't the time or the place. I snapped my head toward him, my eyes blazing. When exactly was the right time, Dad? I practically spat the words. When you told me to just let it go in the dusty garage. When I showed you the brutal bank statements, and you literally turned your back on me to go sand Penny's beautiful picture frame. He didn't answer. His mouth opened and closed like a dying fish, but absolutely nothing came out. The perfect family mask had finally shattered into a million pieces, but the explosion was only just beginning, and the whispers crawling around that long table were about to destroy Loretta's carefully crafted world forever. The suffocating silence finally broke, replaced by a low, furious hiss of whispers crawling around the long dining table. Aunt Rita practically leaned across her untouched plate toward her husband. "Wait a minute," she gasped, her eyes wide. "Delilah has been secretly paying this massive mortgage?" Uncle Paul slowly turned to George. He didn't look angry, he looked absolutely disgusted. It was an expression I had never once seen directed at my father. Cousins exchanged panicked, confused glances across the expensive china, the beautiful, perfect narrative Loretta had spent years meticulously constructing. Delilah, the boring homebody. Delilah, the shy introvert. Delilah, who just selfishly hates to travel, was violently crumbling into dust in real time right before her eyes. Loretta scrambled to recover control. She always had an excuse ready. She volunteered, she announced loudly, her voice shrill and desperate. Nobody forced her to do a single thing. I simply asked for a tiny bit of help and she generously offered. Because that is exactly what real family does. I didn't even blink. I just stared right through her frantic, lying eyes. I literally have the desperate voicemails saved on my phone where you cried and begged me, Mom. January 2022. February 2022. I paused, letting the heavy threat sink into the hot room. I tapped my screen. Would you like me to loudly play them for everyone right here over dessert? Loretta sat down. It wasn't one of her dramatic, sweeping movements. She sat down quietly, like all the arrogant air had violently rushed out of her body. Her perfectly manicured hands went completely flat on the white tablecloth, trembling slightly. For the very first time in my entire invisible life, I watched my mother utterly run out of manipulative words. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. The scrape against the hardwood floor sounded like a gunshot. I calmly picked up Liam's little jacket from the back of his seat. I tightly grabbed his warm, sticky hand. 25 shocked relatives watched me move. Not a single person stood up. Not a single person tried to stop me or say my name. As soon as we hit the heavy front door, my calm exterior completely vanished. My hands wouldn't stop violently shaking. My breath came in short, jagged gasps. I quickly buckled Liam into his booster seat in the back of my terrible Corolla. I double-checked the stubborn strap with clumsy fingers and slammed the door as gently as my racing heart would allow. Liam looked up at me through the smudged window, his big brown eyes completely confused. deeply searching my pale face for an anchor. I climbed into the torn driver's seat and gripped the hot steering wheel so hard my knuckles popped. The cheap synthetic leather felt sticky from the brutal sun. I sat frozen, staring blankly at the massive colonial house through the dirty windshield. The porch light was cheerfully on, the huge flag hung completely limp in the heat. Through the sheer front curtains, I could clearly see dark silhouettes moving wildly. I could faintly hear the muffled, chaotic sounds of raised voices screaming inside. My name was probably being aggressively passed around that ruined table like a disgusting piece of trash, desperate to be explained away. "Mommy," Liam asked softly from the back, kicking his little feet against my seat. "Why is Grandma so mad at you?" I looked at him in the cracked rearview mirror. Just 4 years old, and he was already tragically fluent in reading tense rooms. He knew exactly when the storm was about to hit. "Grandma and I just had a really big disagreement, baby," I whispered, my throat tight. "It's absolutely not your fault. None of this terrible fighting is your fault." He nodded slowly, his face serious. He accepted what I said the exact way young children do, without fully believing a single word of it. BZZZ. My phone violently vibrated against my leg. The bright screen flashed a dreaded name, Loretta. I stared at the glowing rectangle until it finally went black. BZZ. Then it buzzed again, angrier this time, Penelope. The text notifications immediately started firing like rapid machine gun bullets. "You need to fix this nightmare right now. You have absolutely no idea what you've just done to me." "Selfish monster." I didn't reply. I didn't even twitch. I had honestly thought that dropping the explosive truth at that perfect table would make me feel incredibly powerful. I thought it would feel like heavy iron armor wrapping around my chest. I thought it would feel like absolute justice finally arriving with hard paperwork and undeniable receipts. But sitting alone in that baking parking lot with my confused 4-year-old and the terrifying aftershock of what I had just destroyed, it didn't feel like any of those victorious things. It felt exactly like brutal surgery without a single drop of anesthesia. It was necessary. It was precise. And it was absolutely, soul-crushingly devastating. My phone rang one final time. "Catherine." I snatched it up. "Did you do it?" her sharp voice demanded. "I did it," I whispered, barely able to push the breath out. A heavy, satisfying sigh came through the speaker. "Good. Then you drive straight to my place, Del. Both of you, right now. Don't go back to that cheap apartment alone." I shoved the key into the ignition. The old engine coughed and roared to life. I threw the car into drive and violently pulled out of their immaculate driveway. I didn't glance back at the house even once. The first 72 hours were pure, suffocating torture. I hid in my cramped apartment with all the blinds tightly closed. Liam quietly colored thick superhero books on the faded living room carpet. My phone sat face down on the cracked kitchen counter, vibrating endlessly like a trapped, dying insect. I had completely turned off the ringer, but I could still feel the aggressive vibration spreading through the cheap formica like a sickening heartbeat. Loretta had left a frantic voicemail that ran a massive 5 minutes and 15 seconds. I forced myself to listen to it exactly once, sitting in the dark on the bathroom floor. She violently cycled through every emotional register I had ever heard her use. First came the wild, gasping weeping, then the desperate, groveling pleading, then the sick bargaining, and finally the terrifying, sharp threatening. "You are completely ruining this entire family, Delilah," she had screamed into the phone. "If you actually cancel that venue, I will absolutely never, ever forgive you. I gave you everything. Everything." George cowardly sent exactly one text message, just 6 pathetic words. "Please call your poor mother back." Penelope's unhinged messages arrived in crashing tidal waves, 15 screaming texts over 8 brutal hours. The first few were acting deeply wounded. "How could you do this horrible thing to your own sister?" Then they rapidly shifted to pure vicious attacks. "You are so sick and selfish. You always have to make every single thing about pathetic you." By the very last text, Penny had finally found the only selfish argument that actually mattered to her cold heart. "Garrett's rich parents are going to think we are a pathetic joke. You have completely humiliated all of us." Cousins and older aunts slowly trickled in too, acting like wise peacekeepers. Most of them had the exact same terrible advice, delivered in the exact same careful, hushed tone. "Just apologize to her, Delilah. Please. Keep the peace for everyone's sake. It's really not worth the ugly fight." One clueless cousin even dared to add, "Your poor mom is really hurting right now." Hurting? I thought, pressing my forehead against the cold bathroom tile. "She isn't hurting. She's just finally losing control of my wallet. I sat on that freezing bathroom floor at midnight, hugging my knees to my chest. The pull to surrender was absolutely enormous. It was a physical ache in my bones. Every single battered nerve in my body had been meticulously trained over 32 years to snatch up the phone, say I'm so sorry, violently absorb all their blame, and desperately restore the comfortable order. The peacekeeper muscle was by far the strongest one I possessed, and for about 8 terrifying hours in the dark, I almost gave in to the sickness. I almost grabbed the phone. I almost dialed her number. I almost said the pathetic words and let them violently pull me right back into the small, invisible shape they had happily carved out for me. But then my tired eyes caught the glowing screen of my open laptop resting on the toilet lid. The little yellow folder was sitting right there on the bright desktop. Family finances. I reached over and clicked it open with shaking fingers. 42 painful months of auto transfers slowly scrolled down the bright screen. It was a brutal, undeniable timeline of everything I had generously given and everything I had completely lost while giving it. January, February, March. Each single line a massive $2,600 drain, each one confirmed, successfully processed and completed. The cold banking system didn't care about my fragile feelings or my broken family. It simply recorded the hard, brutal facts. I clicked open the digital calculator app. Mortgage payments over 42 months, exactly $109,200. Venue deposit $22,000. Groceries, endless household repairs, George's forgotten copays, and miscellaneous luxury charges on the joint credit card Loretta happily treated like her own personal piggy bank. Approximately $9,500 more. Total, $140,700. I had blindly handed my family $140,700 in just 3.5 years. In that exact same miserable period, I had slept on a lumpy, broken pull-out couch. I had dressed my precious son in cheap, faded secondhand clothes from charity shops. I had skipped crucial dentist appointments because a $50 copay felt like an impossible luxury. And I had anxiously driven a dangerous car with a glowing check engine light that I couldn't even afford to diagnose. I aggressively closed the calculator and popped open a fresh internet browser. I typed the terrifying words: cancellation terms, international venue reservation, Czech Republic. The Grand Venue's elegant website had an incredibly clear policy perfectly written in bold English. Cancellations made more than 90 days before the event date incur a $4,000 administrative fee. The remaining $18,000 is fully refundable within 45 business days. The lavish wedding was scheduled for late July. It was barely mid-May. I had plenty of time. I slammed the laptop shut. The phone was still aggressively buzzing on the cracked counter. I could clearly see the red notification count rapidly climbing higher. 32 missed screaming calls. 48 angry texts. Every single one of them was a different version of the exact same selfish demand. Come back to us. Be perfectly quiet. Open your wallet. Make it right. I slowly reached over, pressed the power button, and watched the bright screen go completely, permanently black. $140,700. That is exactly what my pathetic invisibility cost. And I had been quietly paying the massive bill myself. It was the last freezing night I ever considered going back into the dark. I was running on absolute empty. The emotional hangover from the Memorial Day explosion was a heavy, suffocating fog. At Harrison & Partners, I had a particularly nasty client. He was a wealthy, arrogant real estate developer who honestly believed that paying our firm's retainer meant he bought the right to scream at the staff. He stormed into my cramped office that Tuesday morning, his face entirely red. He started violently yelling about a stupid tax form error, an error that he had personally made. Saliva flew from his mouth as he pounded his fist on my desk. For 3 long years, I would have instantly apologized. I would have cowardly shrunk down to the size of a thumbtack. I would have absorbed his toxic rage exactly the way I absorbed Loretta's. Why am I letting another bully step on my neck? A new fierce voice whispered inside my head. I just blew up my entire family. You are nothing. Something deep inside me had permanently fractured over the weekend, leaving behind sharp, jagged steel. I slowly stood up from my chair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. I looked the furious man dead in his bulging eyes and spoke with absolute freezing clarity. We are completely done. I am permanently closing your account today. You will not speak to me, or anyone else in this building, like that ever again. Leave my office. He was so utterly shocked by my icy tone that his mouth snapped shut. He actually turned around and walked right out the door without another word. I took a deep, shaky breath and turned around. My boss, Madeline Hughes, was standing quietly in the doorway. She had seen the entire confrontation. Madeline called me into her spacious office later that morning. She was the rare kind of boss who kept delicate orchids on her sunny windowsill and never ever raised her voice. Her immense authority was expressed through sharp precision, not loud volume. Her framed CPA license hung simply behind her polished walnut desk. She had hired me 5 years ago. In all that time, she had never once commented on my private life. Until right now. "Close the door, Delilah," she instructed softly. I sat down, my stomach twisting into nervous knots. She folded her hands neatly on the desk. "You just fired our most difficult client in under 2 minutes," she said quietly, her sharp eyes studying my face. "You didn't hesitate. You didn't flinch. So please tell me, Delilah, why on earth are you tolerating a family that treats you significantly worse than that horrible man just did?" I stared at her, completely stunned. The breath left my lungs. She sees right through me. She didn't wait for my pathetic excuse. "Harrison is officially opening a brand new satellite office down in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a small team, 10 solid clients to start, with massive room to grow. I just officially recommended you for the lead bookkeeper position." I rapidly blinked, trying to process the sudden words. "Charleston? The cost of living is much lower there," Madeline continued smoothly. "The public schools are excellent for your son. The salary comes with a modest but very real bump. It's a completely fresh start." She paused, letting the silence stretch before delivering the final beautiful hook. "And it is exactly 6 hours away from here." 6 hours, a completely different state. Far enough to be entirely unreachable by a 45-minute guilt trip. Far enough that Loretta couldn't suddenly show up at my front door with fake tears and wild accusations on a random Wednesday afternoon. "I've watched you carry a massive, invisible weight for years, Delilah. I don't know the ugly details, and I am not asking for them. But you look bone-tired in a deep way that has absolutely nothing to do with office overtime." She met my watering eyes. "Charleston is just 3 hours from the ocean. Liam would absolutely love it. And honestly, you deeply deserve to start building something that is actually yours." I sat frozen in the quiet office, feeling the immense, crushing weight of that one beautiful word, yours. I honestly couldn't remember the last time a single thing in my entire life had been purely mine. Not reluctantly shared. Not temporarily borrowed. Not forcefully given away just to keep someone else's fake, perfect life running smoothly. A life for me and Liam, I thought. A tiny spark of wild hope igniting in my chest. "Can I please think about it?" I whispered. "Of course," Madeline smiled gently. "But the new position officially starts on July 1st. I will need your final answer by the end of this month." July 1st, the exact same month as Penny's lavish European wedding. The poetic symmetry felt entirely deliberate, as if the universe itself was personally handing me a glowing exit sign exactly when I needed to escape the burning building. Later that week, an unknown call came from a 706 area code, Athens, Georgia. I almost didn't pick it up, assuming it was spam. "Delilah, this is your Uncle Richard," I gasped softly. I hadn't heard his gravelly voice in over a decade. Richard Foster was George's younger brother. The dark sheep, the mysterious outcast Loretta always bitterly referred to as the selfish one who just walked away. He had been completely absent from every holiday, every family photo, and every conversation for as long as I could remember. When I was a curious kid, I had asked about him exactly once. Loretta had viciously shut it down. He selfishly chose not to be part of this loving family. "Aunt Rita told me exactly what happened at that Memorial Day dinner," Richard said. His voice was incredibly calm, unhurried, with the faint, warm gravel of a man who worked hard with his hands. "I know exactly what you're going through right now, kid, because Loretta did the exact same terrible thing to me." He finally told me his hidden version of the story. 12 years ago, he had been shockingly excluded from George's milestone 60th birthday party. Loretta had loudly told the entire family that Richard simply didn't care enough to show up. In ugly reality, she had never mailed him an invitation. Why? Because Richard had once bravely questioned how poorly she treated George, and Loretta absolutely did not tolerate dissent. "I spent years desperately trying to prove I belonged," Richard confessed, a deep sadness in his tone. "I blindly drove 4 hours for every single holiday. I brought expensive gifts. I bit my bleeding tongue. Absolutely none of it mattered. The harder I tried to please her, the smaller she made me feel." "What finally changed?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "I just stopped trying. I packed up, moved to Athens, started a quiet woodworking shop, and built a peaceful life that didn't constantly depend on her toxic approval." He paused, letting his hard-earned wisdom sink in. The hardest part isn't physically leaving, Delilah. The hardest part is finally accepting that they are never, ever going to magically change. He offered me something incredibly practical, too. He had close contacts in Charleston from a commercial real estate agent who could easily help me find a safe apartment well within my tight budget. I had spent 32 miserable years believing I was insane. I thought I was the only person who clearly saw the sick, manipulative pattern. It turns out, someone else saw the exact same monster and successfully survived. I am not crazy. I made the final, terrifying call on a Wednesday at exactly noon. It was my lunch break. The office was quiet. My door was firmly locked. The venue coordinator cheerfully answered from Prague, her European accent crisp and highly professional. I took a deep breath, gave her the official reservation number, clearly spelled my legal name, and confirmed the maxed-out credit card on file. Miss Foster, as the registered contract holder, you have full legal authority to modify or cancel this reservation. Per Section 4.2 of the signed agreement, cancellations made more than 90 days prior to the event date are subject to a standard $4,000 administrative fee. The remaining balance of exactly $18,000 will be fully refunded to your original payment method within 45 business days. I understand, I said, my voice steady and cold. Please officially proceed with the total cancellation. Confirmed. You will easily receive an automated email with the cancellation reference number within the hour. Have a lovely day. Click. It took exactly 4 minutes, 3.5 agonizing years of being bled dry, used, and ignored. And it took exactly 240 seconds on a phone to violently sever the biggest financial chain holding me down. The official confirmation email arrived at 1:15 p.m. I read the beautiful black and white text twice, saved the PDF, and printed a hard copy. Then, I quickly composed a brief, icy formal email. I addressed it directly to Loretta and Penelope. Subject line: Venue cancellation, Prague reservation. The venue reservation at the Mala Strana estate has been permanently cancelled, per my legal authority as the registered contract holder. The official cancellation confirmation is attached below. I truly wish Penelope and Garrett a wonderful wedding. I intentionally CC'd my boss, Madeline Hughes. I didn't do it as a petty threat. I did it as a brilliant, professional witness. It created an undeniable, time-stamped record that this massive financial transaction was handled cleanly, legally, and without screaming malice. I moved the mouse over the blue button. I closed my eyes. Goodbye. I pressed send. Exactly 25 minutes later, my dark phone violently lit up. Penelope. 14 frantic calls in a row, each one ringing desperately through to voicemail. I sat at my desk, simply watching the bright screen pulse with her panic, and then go dark. Pulse, and go dark, like a dying heartbeat finally slowing down to nothing. I calmly pressed the mute button, completely silencing her digital screams. Then, I turned back to my detailed spreadsheets. There were actual, paying clients who truly needed my focused attention, but my silent victory was short-lived, because the devastating letter I was about to drop in the mail would trigger a real-life confrontation so ugly, it would force me to literally pack my bags in the middle of the night. Writing the physical letter was significantly harder than making the phone call. Digital phone records disappear into thin air. Paper letters land heavily on wooden dining tables and stay there, demanding to be seen. I wrote it by hand on plain, cheap white paper. No fancy company letterhead. This wasn't a professional business transaction anymore. It was deeply personal. It was the very last thing I would ever write to them as the invisible pack mule who blindly carried their massive weight. I kept the message brutally short. Dear Mom and Dad, this letter is to officially inform you that I will no longer be making any mortgage payments on the Walnut Grove property, effective June 1st. Enclosed you will safely find copies of all 42 monthly bank transfers I have made on your behalf, totaling exactly $109,200. This is not a cruel punishment. This is a necessary correction. I can no longer secretly fund a household that does not include me. I truly wish you both well. Delilah. I read the stark words 4 times. I changed absolutely nothing. I folded the crisp paper and sealed it tightly. I drove to the post office and sent it certified mail, signature strictly required, with the tracking number carefully recorded. The tiny green receipt went straight into my manila folder. I had learned the hard way that with this manipulative family, every single personal boundary required an ironclad paper trail. That exact same afternoon, I logged securely into my bank account. I hovered my mouse over the recurring auto transfer. The banking system politely asked me to confirm the cancellation. I am finally taking my life back, I thought, my chest glowing with a strange, fierce heat. I clicked confirm. The next scheduled payment, June 1st, $2,600, was permanently wiped from the digital queue. I quickly did the mental math one more time. My parents would have roughly 90 days before the angry mortgage servicer sent a formal late notice. That was plenty of time for them to desperately refinance, restructure their debts, or finally figure out how to cover their own bills. I didn't actually want them to lose their beautiful home. I just desperately wanted them to understand exactly whose tired shoulders had been holding up the roof. That quiet evening, Liam and I had a simple dinner at our wobbly kitchen table, warm pasta with melting butter, a tall glass of cold milk for him, and a cheap glass of red wine for me. We happily talked about his day at preschool, something funny about a loud fire truck, and a picture book about giant blue whales. There was no screaming phone, no frantic demands. It was the most peaceful, perfect meal I had eaten in years. Catherine suddenly showed up at 8 o'clock with a greasy pepperoni pizza, a fresh bottle of wine, and 3 thick rolls of clear packing tape. "This is really happening," she said, standing in the narrow doorway of my apartment. She stared at the empty cardboard boxes I had already stacked against the peeling wall. "This is actually happening." She immediately got to work without any emotional fanfare. She rapidly wrapped my cheap glasses in old newspaper, labeling the brown boxes in her sharp, commanding handwriting. Kitchen. Liam's room. Books. She was the rare kind of true friend who showed up with heavy tape and didn't annoyingly ask if you were absolutely sure. Liam helped in his own adorable way, placing his fuzzy stuffed animals very carefully into a small box, then pulling them right back out to arrange them differently. He didn't fully understand what moving far away meant yet. He just knew we were happily putting our things in boxes, and that his mommy suddenly seemed so much lighter than usual. The apartment was painfully small, so packing didn't take long. 5 long years trapped in that one-bedroom box. The cheap Target table, the lumpy pull-out couch that ruined my back, the tiny balcony overlooking the stained parking lot. I had scraped together $1,400 a month for this depressing place, while obediently sending almost double that massive amount to Walnut Grove. The sickening math had always been right there in front of my face. I had just cowardly refused to look at it. Catherine had successfully connected me with Richard's real estate contact down in Charleston. I had already secured a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment near historic Marion Square. It was walking distance to Liam's brand new elementary school, and just 20 minutes from the crashing ocean waves. The southern rent was actually slightly less than what I had been paying here. For the very first time in my adult life, I would finally have a real bedroom with a solid door that closed. "You're not going to drive over and say one last goodbye to them?" Catherine asked softly, ripping a piece of tape across the final box. "No," she simply nodded. No argument, no judgment. She deeply understood that healthy goodbyes require 2 people who actually care about each other, and I had already proven which lonely side of that equation I was on. We drove out of the city on a misty Wednesday morning. Liam instantly fell asleep in the back seat before we even hit the main highway. I watched the green exit signs blur past the dirty windshield, one by one. And for the very first time in 32 years, my phone didn't ring to ask me for a single thing. "I am a ghost, leaving a haunted town," I smiled, pressing the gas pedal a little harder. Charleston welcomed us the exact same way a warm, soothing bath welcomes aching bones. Slowly, completely, and without asking for permission. Our new apartment sat on a gorgeous tree-lined street right in the historic district. It was close enough to the park that I could clearly hear the bubbling fountain from my bedroom window if the humid morning was quiet enough. We had 2 real bedrooms, a sunny kitchen with actual granite counter space, and a small front porch with a weathered rocking chair. The previous tenant had left it behind, and I gladly kept it because Liam proudly claimed it immediately. On his very first day at Grayson Elementary, he came running home with blue paint smeared on his shirt, and a grin so incredibly wide it practically split his face. "Mommy, there's a giant wooden treehouse at recess, and a nice kid named Mason let me use his new crayons." I stood in the bright kitchen unpacking coffee mugs and suddenly felt an overwhelming emotion I couldn't immediately name. It took me 3 full days to finally recognize the strange sensation. It was the complete absence of dread. My shoulders had unclenched. I wasn't nervously bracing for a toxic phone call. I wasn't secretly budgeting someone else's expensive life. I wasn't anxiously calculating how much of my own soul I had to give away today just to buy a scrap of fake love. Work at the new Harrison branch settled into a comfortable, easy rhythm. Nicholas, the local office manager, was straightforward, kind, and fiercely professional. He assigned my daily work, politely said thank you when it was finished, and absolutely never expected me to manage his fragile emotions. The sheer novelty of a healthy workplace almost made me laugh out loud. On a breezy Sunday, Liam and I walked to a charming little cafe near the park. Large wooden ceiling fans spun slowly overhead. The mouth-watering smell of baking biscuits filled the air, while a woman played an acoustic guitar on the sunny patio. Liam confidently ordered his own sweet lemonade, telling the smiling waitress his name without being shy. I sat across from my growing boy with a hot coffee and a thick library book. I realized this was the first Sunday in years where I had absolutely nothing I was supposed to be doing for someone else. In my old life, silence simply meant someone was about to scream for me. Here in Charleston, silence just meant beautiful, healing silence. Catherine kept me steadily updated on the northern drama, not to fuel my anger, but because she firmly believed I deserved to know the massive consequences of my own courage. The Prague venue cancellation hit them first. Penelope had frantically tried to rebook the Grand Malastrana estate under her own name, but the exclusive summer calendar was completely full. She spent 3 miserable weeks crying and calling every single venue in Central Europe. Everything decent was either double her budget or half her royal ambition. Loretta, according to the family grapevine, had spent an entire panicked weekend calling wealthy old friends, desperately looking for a magical connection, as if her fake social circle actually extended across the Atlantic Ocean. They finally found a cheap replacement, a much smaller restaurant with a cramped private dining room near the river. No lush garden terrace, no historic wrought iron gates, no sweeping stone courtyard. Penelope reportedly wept bitter tears when she saw the depressing photos. The mortgage reality landed even harder. George finally received my certified letter. He called Loretta into the kitchen to read the stark paper together. According to Aunt Rita, it was the very first time Loretta ever learned the exact monthly amount, $2,600. She had never bothered to ask. She had never looked at the statements. She simply assumed her invisible daughter would keep magically paying the bill, the exact same way you lazily assume the power company keeps the streetlights on. They entirely missed the June payment. The bank servicer sent a harsh warning notice. George desperately called to ask about restructuring the loan. He was coldly told their terrible income-to-debt ratio required either a wealthy cosigner or a massive cash down payment to refinance. Penelope's shiny Lincoln was quickly listed for sale by the end of the month. George, completely out of options, swallowed his pride and did something he hadn't done in a decade. He called Uncle Richard and begged to borrow money. Richard gave him a one-word answer. No. I love you, George, Richard had told his brother over the phone, but I am absolutely not going to fund Loretta's fake luxury lifestyle any more than poor Delilah should have. Loretta furiously tried to reach me through every single digital channel she could invent. My old phone number was completely blocked. She sent massive, rambling emails. I didn't open a single one. Then, the unthinkable happened. They showed up. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon, exactly 4 weeks after my peaceful move. I was sitting at my desk, quietly reviewing a client's quarterly tax report. Suddenly, Nicholas appeared in my open doorway. He wore an expression I hadn't seen on his friendly face before, half deeply concerned, half highly apologetic. Delilah, he said softly, his voice tight. There are 2 angry women standing out in the front lobby fiercely asking for you. They loudly claim they are your family. My stomach violently dropped to the floor. The blood drained completely from my face. I stood up on shaking legs and walked out slowly. Through the thick glass office partition, I could clearly see the nightmare. Loretta stood there in her expensive Ann Taylor blazer and perfect pearl earrings, her posture completely rigid, her leather handbag clutched like a dangerous weapon. Penny stood right beside her, wearing oversized designer sunglasses she hadn't bothered to take off indoors. Her arms were tightly crossed, her jaw locked in pure rage. They looked entirely displaced. 2 arrogant women from a fake world of orchid centerpieces and monogrammed napkins, aggressively standing in a modest Charleston office lobby with cheap industrial carpet and buzzing fluorescent lights. George must have foolishly tricked Richard into giving up my new address. That was the only possible leak. They had tracked me down to drag me back into the dark, but they were about to realize that the obedient, quiet daughter they came looking for was already dead. Loretta's sharp, demanding voice easily carried through the glass partition, before my trembling hand even reached the heavy door. Delilah, you need to come outside right now. We are going to fix this terrible mess today. The young receptionist behind the front desk stopped typing, glancing at me sideways with wide, alarmed eyes. Two coworkers standing by the humming printer completely froze, staring at the unfolding drama. My heart hammered against my ribs, but before I could take another step, Nicholas confidently stepped forward. He was incredibly calm and unhurried. "Excuse me, can I help you ladies with something?" Nicholas asked, his tone perfectly polite but lined with absolute steel. "This is a professional place of business." Penny shot him a disgusted, arrogant look through her dark designer frames. "Back off. This is a private family matter." "And this is a private workplace," Nicholas replied smoothly, completely refusing to raise his voice or step aside. I gently put my hand on his broad shoulder. "It's okay, Nicholas," I whispered, forcing a brave smile. "I'll handle it. Give me 10 minutes. He gave a short, firm nod, but he absolutely refused to leave the front lobby. Instead, he leaned back against the high reception counter and slowly folded his arms. He remained fully present, highly visible, and unmistakably protective. It struck me with the force of a physical blow. This was a manager I had only known for 4 short weeks, yet he was showing infinitely more respect for my personal boundaries than my own flesh and blood had shown in 32 years. I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped out into the blazing southern heat. My mother stood there in the blinding afternoon sun, fully expecting to easily bulldoze the exact same weak, obedient Delilah who always bent to her will. She had no idea she was about to meet a completely different woman. The Charleston parking lot was brutally hot and suffocatingly still. A long line of ancient live oak trees cast deep, dark shadows across the melting asphalt. Loretta stood with her spine completely straight, gripping her purse tightly, as if arrogant posture alone could magically re-establish her broken authority. "You need to uncancel that European venue immediately," she demanded, completely skipping a simple hello. "Penelope's wedding is in exactly 8 weeks. This tantrum has gone on long enough." "The grand venue is officially cancelled, Mom," I replied, my voice steady and cold. "The entire deposit is currently being refunded directly to my checking account." "This is completely absurd," Loretta hissed, stepping closer. "You are selfishly throwing away your own sister's beautiful wedding over one tiny misunderstood comment at a dinner table." Penny aggressively stepped forward, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "So, what? You're just going to financially ruin my entire dream wedding because Mom said one mean thing?" I looked at my older sister, feeling absolutely nothing but pity. "One thing, Penny? Mom specifically told Garrett's wealthy family I wasn't comfortable in formal settings. She completely excluded me from the secret travel group chat and boldly told everyone I chose not to go. She intentionally rewrote every single story about why I wasn't there." I held her terrified gaze, refusing to blink, and she did all of it while I was literally writing the massive checks keeping a roof over your heads. Loretta's voice hardened into a vicious sneer. "I am your mother. And I am your daughter," I fired back, my voice completely unwavering. "But you made it entirely clear at that holiday table that I am not part of this family's perfect picture. I am not arguing with you about this anymore. I am simply accepting exactly what you told me." The hot parking lot fell completely, terrifyingly quiet. A random car drove slowly past on the busy street behind us. Somewhere in the heavy branches above, a lone bird called out and got absolutely no answer. Penny's bottom lip trembled wildly. Loretta's angry eyes suddenly went wet, but her stubborn jaw remained firmly locked. Neither of them reached out. Neither of them said the one simple, healing word that might have changed something. "Sorry." It just hung heavily in the humid air between us, like a heavy iron door that nobody was brave enough to open. "I truly hope Penny has a beautiful wedding," I finally said, the quiet truth ringing in the still air. "I honestly mean that. But I absolutely will not be funding it. And I will not spend another second pretending everything is fine." I turned my back on them and walked straight through the heavy glass door. It closed securely behind me with a very soft, quiet click, the kind of sound that is barely audible, but absolutely permanently final. "You can have a beautiful family without me," I thought, walking back to my desk. "But you can never again have my hard-earned money, my precious time, and my silent obedience while pretending I don't exist." That was the very last sentence I ever spoke directly to my mother's face. The ripple of absolute truth spread slowly, the way real justice always does, not in a single, crashing wave, but in 1,000 small, undeniable corrections. Catherine happily called me a week after the parking lot confrontation. She had just finished lunch with Aunt Rita, who had recently shared coffee with 2 gossiping cousins who had been talking deeply to Uncle Paul. The busy family grapevine, for the very first time in history, was finally carrying the accurate, unedited story. The grand wedding had been officially, brutally downgraded. Penelope and Garrett were married at a cramped, inexpensive restaurant near the Vltava River. There were only 15 guests instead of 50. They served a cheap prix-fixe menu instead of roaming a private historic estate. There was no sweeping stone courtyard, no romantic wrought iron gates. Loretta smiled brightly in the posted photos, but Rita noted that her tired eyes looked exactly like someone had permanently turned the bright dimmer switch all the way down. Back home, the painful mortgage restructure finally went through, but at a significantly higher monthly interest rate. George and Loretta were forced to quickly sell the luxury Lincoln just to cover the massive financial gap. George quietly picked up part-time consulting work, light drafting, nothing his bad back couldn't handle. They were barely managing, but the soft, luxurious cushion I had secretly provided was completely gone. The big colonial house on Walnut Grove was technically still theirs, but for the very first time in their arrogant lives, they finally understood exactly what it cost to keep the lights on. The extended family suddenly had endless questions. Rita simply told anyone who dared to ask the exact same blunt truth. Delilah was secretly paying for absolutely everything. Nobody knew. Several distant cousins reached out to my new number directly. Short, careful, and deeply sincere text messages. I had absolutely no idea, Del. I am so incredibly sorry. I politely thanked each one of them, but I didn't elaborate. The one phone call I truly didn't expect came directly from Garrett Winslow. He had quietly gotten my private number from Aunt Rita. Delilah, his deep voice sounded heavy with regret. I just want you to know I didn't know a single piece of this ugly puzzle until that Memorial Day dinner. What your family did to you was completely wrong. I firmly told Penny that. I firmly told her mother that. You deeply deserved so much better. I thanked him softly. I honestly meant it. But I didn't engage a single inch beyond that polite acceptance. Garrett was Penny's legal husband now. That was their toxic mess to safely navigate. The hard facts had finally caught up with Loretta's wild fiction, and absolutely nobody could rewrite this final version. The unexpected envelope arrived in early September. It was plain white, with absolutely no return address. But I instantly recognized the sharp handwriting. My father had always written in tight, extremely careful letters, the exact penmanship of a quiet man who measured things for a living. I slowly sliced it open at my new kitchen table while Liam happily ate sweet cereal in the next room. The comforting, familiar sound of Saturday morning cartoons drifted softly through the open doorway. The handwritten letter was exactly 1 page long. No fancy preamble. Delilah, I have been sitting here thinking about what to say to you for 4 long months, and I still don't have the right words. I know that's not nearly good enough. I should have bravely spoken up a long time ago. At that Memorial Day dinner. Out in the dusty garage. At every single holiday meal where your mother said something cruel that made you feel small. And I cowardly said absolutely nothing. I always told myself I was just keeping the family peace. I wasn't. I was just selfishly keeping my own quiet comfort. I should have said something. I should have said a lot of things. I am not writing this to beg you to come back, or to ask you to pay for anything ever again. I'm writing this because you are my beautiful daughter, and you truly deserved a brave father who stood up for you. I didn't. That heavy failure is entirely on me. Liam looks exactly like you when you were little. Same bright eyes, same serious expression when he's thinking hard about the world. I miss him. I miss you. But I completely understand if you need a lot of time. I understand if you need a lifetime of it. Dad, I read the painful words twice. The second time, my vision blurred heavily with hot tears, and the sharp ink went soft around the edges. It wasn't a perfect apology, not a completely full one. He cowardly didn't mention Loretta's specific lies. He didn't clearly explain why 30 years of toxic silence had ever felt acceptable to him. He didn't make any grand promises to magically change, but it was the very first honest, vulnerable thing he had ever put in writing. And for a deeply flawed man who had spent his entire existence avoiding hard conversations, 1 single page was probably everything he had left inside him. I carefully folded the fragile paper and placed it deep inside my bedside drawer. I didn't angrily throw it away. I didn't proudly frame it. I just let it quietly exist in the dark. It felt exactly like a heavy wooden door left very slightly open. A door that I simply wasn't ready to walk through yet. Loretta's letter arrived 2 weeks later, but it came through Catherine. It was hand-delivered, because every single direct digital line to me had been completely severed. Catherine called me right before ripping the envelope open. "It's from your mom," she warned, her tone suspicious. "Do you want me to pre-read it first?" "Go ahead," I sighed, leaning back in my porch rocking chair. I clearly heard the thick paper tear. A long, silent pause followed. Then Catherine's voice came through the speaker, completely flat with absolute disbelief. She starts with the usual garbage. I just want my beautiful family back. I think about you every single day. Let's put this silly misunderstanding behind us and start fresh. Standard manipulative stuff. Heavy guilt. Fake nostalgia. A crazy line about how her words at Memorial Day were completely taken out of context. But then, Catherine took a sharp breath. Dell. She literally attached an invoice. I blinked. She what? An official invoice from the cheap replacement venue in Prague. The new last-minute restaurant was exactly $8,500 more expensive than the Malastrana estate you booked. She actually wrote a handwritten note at the very bottom. This is the massive financial difference your selfish decision caused. Please Venmo Penny the full amount at your earliest convenience. I sat completely still on my quiet southern porch. The warm evening light filtered beautifully through the swaying oak branches. And then I laughed. It wasn't a bitter, broken sound. It was genuine, echoing, full-bellied laughter. The incredibly rare kind of laugh that only comes when something is so perfectly, insanely consistent with everything you already know that feeling surprised is absolutely impossible. Of course she did, I smiled, wiping a tear of pure humor from my eye. Catherine started laughing loudly too. Hers was shorter, much sharper. I swear to God, Dell, this insane woman could figure out a way to bill you for her own funeral. I didn't bother to reply to the letter. There was absolutely nothing left on this earth to say to a toxic person who could confidently attach a fake reconciliation note to an $8,500 payment request and see absolutely no sickening contradiction. That piece of paper wasn't a bridge back home. That was a greedy toll booth poorly disguised as a loving olive branch. But the total freedom I found in the aftermath was about to change my life, and my son's life, in ways I never saw coming. That very same evening the phone rang. It was Uncle Richard. Over the past month we had naturally fallen into talking every week or so. They were always short, incredibly warm conversations. We mostly chatted about his quiet woodworking shop and Liam's messy school drawings. Let me take a wild guess, Richard said softly, a knowing chuckle in his gravelly voice. She sent a thick guilt letter, but she secretly hid a massive bill inside it. I gasped. How on earth did you know that? Because she sent me the exact same envelope in 2014, he sighed heavily. Mine was for a huge catering deposit at George's 60th birthday party. The exact same party she purposely didn't invite me to. I am not alone, I realized, sinking deeper into my rocking chair. Some toxic family patterns, it turns out, don't just blindly repeat themselves. They get carefully passed down, generation to generation, until someone is finally brave enough to break the chain. By November, the crisp autumn air had finally reached the coast. Charleston had officially stopped feeling like a strange city I had escaped to, and fully transformed into the home where I belonged. Saturday mornings had become a sacred ritual, just ours. Mine and Liam's. We would happily walk hand in hand to the bustling farmers market near Marion Square. It was the beautiful kind of southern outdoor market that constantly smells like fresh peaches, salty roasted peanuts, and the faint, sugary sweetness of warm kettle corn. A lively bluegrass duo always played upbeat music under a bright white tent. Sweet old couples slow danced on the grass. Kids ran freely between the wooden stalls with sticky hands and enormous, genuine smiles. Liam had his own special routine. A paper bag of boiled peanuts first, then a quick run to the corner stand that sold homemade dog biscuits. Even though we didn't actually own a dog, he just loved the gentle way the older woman behind the table let him carefully pick which treats to sample. She always tipped her hat and called him young sir. Every single time she said it, my sweet boy walked away standing at least 3 inches taller. I would stroll lazily behind him with my hot coffee, watching my son navigate the massive crowd. He moved with the quiet, beautiful confidence of a child who finally felt completely safe. He had already made 2 wonderful friends at his new school, a loud boy named Mason and a smart girl named Jasmine, who eagerly shared his absolute obsession with ocean whales. His kindergarten teacher pulled me aside one afternoon to say he was kind, deeply focused, and sometimes far too serious for a 4-year-old. I recognized that heavy seriousness, I thought, my heart aching slightly, but we are fixing it. At work, my new life was blooming just as beautifully. Nicholas proudly called me into his office and offered me a small client portfolio to manage entirely independently. 8 solid accounts. Nothing overly dramatic, but it was incredibly monumental for my soul. It was the very first time in my adult life someone had truly trusted me with something valuable based strictly on what my brain could do, not what my wallet was willing to sacrifice. I called Catherine that night from the breezy porch, looking up at the bright stars. "Cat, I think I am actually happy. Is that even allowed?" "It is strictly required," she answered fiercely. "And it is massively overdue." My new apartment was wonderfully simple. Liam's colorful crayon drawings proudly decorated the hallway walls. A sturdy wooden bookshelf I had found at a charming second-hand store held all our favorite stories. A green pothos plant sat on the sunny windowsill, somehow miraculously thriving despite my terrible inability to remember basic watering schedules. Nobody texted me to demand money. Nobody asked me to fix their broken life that morning. And somehow that quiet emptiness was absolutely everything. Penelope finally got married on the very last Saturday in July. I found out the exact same way you passively find out about the mild weather in a distant city you no longer live in, without a single ounce of urgency. Aunt Rita simply texted me a digital photo. She didn't add any dramatic commentary, just the raw image. Penelope stood stiffly in a bright white gown, her blonde hair swept up perfectly, gripping a tight bouquet of expensive orchids. Garrett stood beside her in a sharp charcoal suit, looking exactly like a tired man who was only mostly sure about what he was doing. Loretta stood rigidly beside them, wearing her signature pearls and a heavy blazer. She was smiling the exact way fake people smile in forced portraits. Correctly, convincingly, but entirely emptily. The venue was incredibly small, a cramped private room with narrow arched windows and plain white tablecloths. A few cheap flowers sat sadly in low glass vases. It looked perfectly fine, but it looked exactly like what you hopelessly settle for when the original magical plan completely falls through and you desperately don't want the guests to notice you are broke. I studied the glowing photo on my phone screen for maybe 15 seconds. I noticed the hard numbers a trained bookkeeper automatically notices. The gathered crowd was extremely thin. The rented room was uncomfortably tight. The table centerpieces were embarrassingly modest. But then I noticed what a daughter notices. My mother's arrogant posture was absolutely perfect, but her dark eyes looked deeply, tragically tired. It was the specific, bone-deep exhaustion that only comes from desperately holding on to a fake shape that no longer fits your reality. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I just calmly set the phone face down on the cool granite counter. That very same afternoon, Liam and I drove straight out to Folly Beach. Just 20 easy minutes from our front door to the warm sand and healing salt air. He ran wildly ahead of me, kicking his little shoes off before I could even tell him to. He charged straight into the rolling, shallow waves with his small arms thrown wide open, exactly like he was trying to physically hug the entire ocean. I sat quietly on the soft beach towel and let the bright southern sun do its warming work on my skin. I honestly didn't feel bitter about the wedding. I didn't feel victorious either. I just felt incredibly present. I was right here, anchored in this beautiful place, breathing fresh air with my healthy son, living a peaceful life I had bravely chosen instead of the miserable one I had been forcefully assigned. Rita sent exactly one more text message much later that evening. "Only 3 people asked where you were today. Your mom quickly lied and said you were sick, but nobody at the table believed her anymore. She was trapped in a cramped room in Prague. I was barefoot at the beach, and for the very first time in my existence, I knew exactly which one of us was standing in the right place. By the time the leaves finally began to turn in Charleston, a much slower, gentler fading process than the harsh winters up north, 8 full months had passed since that explosive Memorial Day dinner. The entire landscape of my life was completely unrecognizable, in the absolute best way possible. The proud Fosters up on Walnut Grove had officially downsized. The massive, beautiful colonial house was quietly sold in late October. They didn't sell it at a terrible loss, but they certainly didn't get the sky-high luxury price Loretta had arrogantly imagined either. They hastily packed up and moved into a basic 2-bedroom townhouse in a much quieter, boring neighborhood. George's part-time drafting consulting barely covered their new basic utilities. And Loretta? According to Rita's whispers, my mother had been forced to take a part-time job working a cash register at a local floral shop. It was her very first real paycheck in over 25 years. Penny and Garrett were officially married, but the shiny facade was already cracking. Garrett had drawn a massive, unmovable hard line right after Memorial Day. He had looked Loretta directly in the eye and told her that what she did to me was completely, unforgivably unacceptable. That firm boundary had created immediate, ugly friction. Rita said Penny and Loretta's famous Saturday gossip calls had slowly dwindled from weekly to bi-weekly to whenever Penny actually felt like answering the phone. The toxic dynamic that had sustained them for decades, the flawless golden child and her devoted, obsessive stage mother, was violently straining under the heavy weight of a rich son-in-law who simply refused to play their sick games. Loretta had not reached out to me with a genuine apology. Honestly, I had completely stopped expecting one. I was officially promoted at Harrison's Charleston office right before December, senior bookkeeper. A beautiful, heavy title I had proudly earned by showing up, doing the hard work, and absolutely never apologizing for simply existing. Liam had officially started kindergarten and was already reading a full level above his grade. His amazing teacher used the word thriving during our parent conference. I had never once heard that beautiful word attached to anything in my entire family history before. I also bravely started therapy, not because I was hopelessly broken, but because I desperately wanted to understand the ugly family patterns well enough to make absolutely sure Liam never ever inherited them. In late January, I finally sat down and wrote George a simple letter. It was incredibly short, brutally honest, and left the door cracked open. When you are finally ready for an honest conversation, a real one, I will be right here. I meant every single word of it. But I also deeply understood that the phone call might never actually come, and my heart had finally made total peace with that silence. I used to foolishly measure my human worth by exactly how much money and time I blindly gave away. Now I strictly measure my worth by how incredibly light I feel when I wake up in the morning. I want to tell you something very important, and I need you to hear it exactly the way I mean it. I didn't leave my family just to cruelly punish them. I left because I finally realized that staying was only punishing myself. Every single month I wrote that massive check. Every major holiday I cooked that exhausting meal. Every single time I swallowed the burning sting of being totally overlooked. I was actively teaching my family that I didn't matter, and so much worse than that, I was silently teaching my innocent son the exact same terrible lesson. My mother desperately wanted a perfect family portrait without my face in it, so I finally stepped out of the way and let her have it. And I went far away and built my own beautiful frame. It is absolutely not a perfect life. I still have random, quiet mornings where the old, toxic guilt slowly creeps into my chest. Heavy mornings where I stare at the ceiling and wonder if I should have tried a little harder, stayed a little longer, or found just one more magical way to make them finally see me. Therapy helps immensely with those dark mornings, but so does Liam's bright, smiling face when he runs into the kitchen to tell me all about his amazing day. That thick manila folder is sitting in the back of my dark closet right now. I don't ever look at it anymore. I don't need to. The hard paper did its exact job. It loudly told the undeniable truth when my own paralyzed voice couldn't. But the real, living evidence of who I actually am isn't hiding inside highlighted bank statements or signed venue contracts. It is in the beautiful way my son laughs out loud without ever checking the room to see if anyone approves of his joy. It is in the peaceful, quiet apartment with the creaking rocking chair on the sunny porch. It is in a breezy Saturday morning at the farmer's market, where absolutely nobody needs me to be anything other than exactly who I am. If you are the Delilah in your family right now, the exhausted one who constantly pays, who endlessly plans, who blindly shows up, who holds the entire crumbling roof together and gets absolutely nothing but disrespect back, please, hear my voice. You are fully allowed to stop carrying them. You are allowed to walk out the door, and you are allowed to be incredibly okay afterward. Choosing your own peace is not selfishness. That is pure survival. Mommy, can we go to the beach now? Liam stood happily in the bright doorway, his little shoes already clutched in his hands, grinning from ear to ear. I smiled back, grabbing my keys. Yeah, baby, let's go. But before you go, I need you to ask yourself one terrifying, life-changing question. Whose fake, perfect life are you secretly funding with your own happiness? That is my final story. I really want to know which specific part hit the absolute hardest for you. Was it A, the explosive Memorial Day dinner announcement? B, the exact moment I threw those bank statements on the table? Or C, the insane letter with the venue invoice attached? Drop your honest answer down in the comments below. And if you know someone who desperately needs to hear this exact message, someone who gives and gives and gives and never gets a drop back, please share this video directly with them. There is a full playlist of survival stories just like this one linked in the description. I will see you all in the next one. And hey, strictly protect your peace.